Thank you, Jeremy. I really appreciate that excerpt because so much of what I have to say does revolve around story catching. Before I get started, I do want to acknowledge that many of us are feeling a great amount of despair at the moment, particularly around the continued occupation of our city by ICE and the damage that this has caused to our communities. It's a heavy thing to carry, even more so when we're already struggling with the burden of existing within systems that seek to perpetuate our oppression. However, and more importantly, in spite of all this opposition, we continue to show up for each other in so many ways. And the more we show up, the more we build the collective power necessary to combat that despair. So, if you've even so much as sent a text checking to see if someone is doing okay at this time, thank you for your contribution. I really appreciate it. I've been avoiding doing the Vocation Chapel for a while now. Jeremy can tell you that. 2 years I've been avoiding the Vocation Chapel. I thought it was 1.5. Not because I didn't want to do it, but because I wasn't sure how I could begin to communicate something that feels so nebulous and beyond me. The concept of my vocation makes sense to me, but I don't know if I have the words necessary to describe it properly to everybody else. I still don't think I have any of those words, but thank you for spending some time this morning listening to what I have to say. So recently I've been reflecting on a couple of things. The first is an interview that the pop star Dua Lipa did with the author Percival Everett, where he says,
as a writer, I may well have something that I mean, something that I think I'm saying. But the art itself, it's not complete until the reader comes to it. That's when meaning gets made. People find their truth in art, whether it's music or painting or literature. They bring their world to the work and find what they need.
So I'm specifically thinking about this idea that meaning making requires some amount of interaction, some level of connection between two people, or a connection between an individual and an action or a concept or object. This applies to moments where I'm trying to make sense of my world, or other people are trying to understand how I'm showing up in it. The second is a moment from about a month ago when one of my best friends, Sierra, told me that I have to make everything a thing. It took me a second to figure out what she meant by this. Eventually, I understood that what she was talking about is my desire to know everything on a deeper level. I have to make sense of or find meaning in everything around me in order for anything to feel real. For the astrologically inclined, this makes sense when I tell you that my Mercury, which determines how we communicate and process information, and Jupiter, which rules idealism and philosophy, are both in Sagittarius. I've been reflecting on these things quite a bit because I, like a lot of us, am trying to figure out what my role should be in the midst of everything that's currently happening in our communities. In the face of all this unprecedented chaos, how can we begin to determine what we're supposed to do or who we're supposed to be? This isn't something new for me, though. I've spent most of my life curious about what it means to find my place in the world. To clarify, I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up at the time, but I never had a clear reason why I wanted that. Sure, the idea of being an astronaut or a lawyer or a marine biologist was fun or maybe paid well, but I never really thought of any of these things as my calling. Growing up, I don't think I had the proper means to answer the question of my calling. My immigrant mother was a firm believer that all I needed to do was make good grades and work hard. The rest would figure itself out. And because she was a person I had a lot of reverence for, I never bothered to look for something beyond the advice she swore by. I had no reason to. She was proof enough that maybe that was all I needed. Oh gosh. One of the great turning points of my life came after my high school graduation. I was getting ready to leave my Texas hometown for Minneapolis to start college back in 2014. There were plenty of reasons why I ended up choosing to attend the University of Minnesota. Mostly, I was a teen with a lot of angst, and I was deeply convinced that the only way I could become the person I wanted to be was by leaving behind my life in Texas and being in a place where I was alone and less burdened by my parents' surveillance. Also, it was the only out-of-state school I got accepted to whose tuition gave my mom the least anxiety. I was incredibly grateful for the opportunity, so with my mother's advice to work hard and everything will work out, I began this new chapter. Being far away from home was a great feeling. I had never experienced this level of freedom before, and I tried to make the most of it as much as I could. I was excelling academically and believed that this was the key to figuring out what the rest of my life would look like. However, despite the success I was experiencing during my first semester, I still felt pretty directionless. Any decision I tried to make about what I should major in and what that could lead to when I graduate felt wrong, and I didn't know why. I was working so hard, harder than I maybe ever have in my life, but it didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. I found myself in a situation that I was severely unequipped to face. I had always been able to figure out everything on my own. It was something I took great pride in, but I also knew that unless I started to look for help, things weren't going to go well. I was still a little uncomfortable with the idea of going to an advisor or a counselor, sorry to the academic advisors in the space, to help me solve the dilemma I was facing. So instead of making an appointment with one of them, I was determined to make at least one friend who might be able to help me out. During this time, I was engaging in what felt like a million awkward introductions in my dorm, my classes, or at whatever party I scored an invite to, of which there were many, hoping that I could bond with someone who felt the same way that I did. As my first semester went on, I was lucky enough to meet people who understood what I was going through. I built a solid group of friends that I ended up relying on for a lot of things. They helped me feel more settled in my new home, stayed up late with me to study for exams, and most importantly, helped me develop an interest in the practice of building connections with the people around me. As I deepened these connections with my friends, I learned about their hopes and dreams for the future, all the ways that each of them want to show up in the world, and everything they're doing to define that purpose. These conversations taught me something really important: the kind of person I want to be, and all the interactions required to define my purpose, to find my calling, didn't just impact me. It also had some amount of impact, and maybe some meaning, on everyone that is or will be part of my world. I learned that the process of finding my why isn't an individual endeavor. It requires collective effort. For most of the time I was an undergrad, I was very politically active and would often find myself getting involved with local organizing efforts on and off campus. Community organizing became something that I found a lot of joy in. Much like with my friends, I was making connections with my neighbors and other community members. I got to learn about their hopes and dreams and how they want to show up in the world. And in talking about the issues that mattered to them, I learned a great deal about all the systems that prevented my neighbors from arriving at their why. This was another big turning point for me. Community organizing not only gave me an opportunity to make connections with others, it also gave me a wonderful set of tools to start pushing back against the systems that were stifling my community. So this eventually led me into a career in electoral politics after I graduated from the U in 2018. I was really committed to the idea that we need to develop alternative ways of existing. I was frustrated because the systems I'm told I need to survive were the same ones that limited my ability to exist freely. And even though I was doing my best to address these issues, it never felt like I was creating any sustainable change. I was talking to a friend about how discouraging this work has become, and he quickly reminded me that I'm not doing this work alone. There were plenty of people that I can rely on to help me build lasting change. It was one of those aha moments for me. Just like back when I was in school and realized that finding my why required collective effort, I began to understand that change-making was the same. Following our conversation, I leaned on the connections I had made over the last few years even more. I saw that a lot of my peers and neighbors felt the same way I did. So, I started looking for ways to gather people who were experiencing similar challenges, and we began to develop solutions that we felt were more representative of the future we wanted for our communities. One of the greatest examples of collective change-making that I've had the privilege of being a part of happened over the course of summer 2020. The murder of George Floyd cast a large spotlight on the need for systemic change. And while calls for justice rang loudly in our city, the systems that we worked to change sought to quiet our voices through armed occupation. This occupation left so many of our neighbors unhoused, displaced encampments, and created conditions that made it even harder for people to survive. All in the middle of a global pandemic. Despite the conditions that made it extremely difficult to be in community and get anything done, we managed to find ways to safely come together and show up for each other anyway. Through the nonprofit I was working for at the time, we gathered folks who felt activated in the moment to facilitate the collection and distribution of necessary resources to the people who needed them most. It started small, but as we continued to rely on the connections we made with our friends and neighbors, this mutual aid effort grew, expanding to protest riot shares, community concerts that raised funds to help support our neighbors, and other long-term projects that work to address needs beyond material ones. These grassroots efforts gave us glimpses of the alternatives that I and a lot of my neighbors had been dreaming of for a long time, alternatives that we can achieve by coming together and working towards the common goal of liberation. And even though I no longer work in electoral politics and community organizing, I continue to make meaning of my world through the practice of making connections with others, rallying people together, and seeking alternative ways of existing. I know that these things will always remain with me. I maintain the belief that the changes we want to see in our lifetime and beyond requires us to understand each other on a deeper level. It's something that has always motivated the work that I do here at Augsburg. I am incredibly lucky that my role within this institution allows me to connect with and support students every single day. I'm filled with hope whenever I get a chance to hear them speak about their hopes and dreams for the future. It's exciting to see students arriving at their why. So, if you ever find yourself wondering what you should be doing at this moment, take the time to get to know the people around you. Chances are that a single connection can open a world of possibilities. And in the spirit of meaning making and making connections, I'll leave you with this playlist of songs that shaped my thoughts as I prepared for this vocation chapel. Feel free to scan the QR code. Sorry, it's on Spotify. I hope that you can bring your world to this small body of work and find what you need. And I'll kind of wait for people to be done scanning the QR code. Does someone still need to scan the QR code? Are we good? Thank you.